Miami Dolphins running back De'Von Achane is one of the most polarizing running backs in dynasty leagues right now. Just how high should you draft him? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Magdziuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Magdziuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. On today's show, we are recapping the Miami Dolphins 2023 season, discussing the biggest winners, losers, and potential trade targets. And Kate, we've got to start with this tiny running back from the Dolphins that had a nice rookie season.
Had a very nice rookie season. De'Von Achane has to be the biggest dynasty winner. I got to say, Marcus, I'm going to tease this a little bit. I don't know if I agree with this current value. So back in August of 2023, Achane was being drafted on average as the RB 28. And I think a lot of people saw the upside and potential of a running back that is this fast in the Miami Dolphins offense, because hello, this is a fast-paced offense, loaded with speed, breakaway runs. Like, you can see the potential written on the wall, and it came to fruition mostly. Right now, he is being drafted on average as the RB7 in Dynasty, a top 10 running back, which, Marcus, we got a glimpse at the upside, okay? We got a glimpse at the upside, and I'm not here to deny it. We saw a 233 scrimmage yard game, 4 touchdowns. He was fantastic.
Didn't start.
But, Marcus, he missed 6 games this season. And, like, for a guy whose main concern coming out of the draft for me was size specifically, like, he's fast, and the good thing is that speed will make it so that he's hit less often. But he missed 6 games this season. He had a shoulder injury in the preseason. He missed 1 game with that injury, had a knee injury that, he had that stint on IR, came back for a game, took 1 carry, left the game again, missed the following week with that re-aggravation. We're drafting him purely based on upside, and I think the floor for Achane is quite low. Again, he's a 3rd round pick, so not necessarily
An early 3rd round pick, though.
Early 3rd round pick, but he's not a 1st round running back. And, like, 3rd round, I get that that's higher than plenty of other running backs that were drafted, but still, it's not 1st round draft capital. He had 10 or fewer rush attempts in 6 of the 10 games that he played in full. And again, 2 of those games, he ended up leaving after playing 6 or fewer snaps. Like, you need to be on the field if you are looking to make a name for yourself. If I'm drafting you as a top 10 running back in Dynasty, I need to know that you're on the field. And Marcus, I'm looking at the Miami Dolphins, and I kind of think they'd be a little crazy not to be drafting an insurance policy. Because again, while he's on the field, you only need him to get so many touches. But I've got to be very concerned about the lack of availability, and I'm not sure I'm looking to invest that highly here in Dynasty.
I don't disagree with any of your points. And I agree that I think they need to grab somebody else, because Raheem Mostert, finished 2nd in the NFL in touchdowns this year. He's 31. And if you look at his history of health, it's not great either, right? The other running backs are Jeff Wilson on this team. And again, another running back that can't stay healthy. The problem with the Dolphins is they just don't have a lot of draft capital. And they've got so many needs on both sides of the ball. They need more edge rush help. They need more linebacker help. They certainly could use some more offensive line help. And they're way over the cap. I just don't know if they're going to have the resources to go out and draft a running back, which probably means it's just going to be Raheem Mostert and Achane again this year, right? And I got to believe They're going to continue to just give Achane more and more opportunities. I understand that the floor is low here.
The floor is very low.
But there is like legit RB1 upside, like the overall RB1. Like if I told you right now, Kate, that he averaged 18 touches a game and he played 15 games,
I'd say he would last probably through 2 weeks with his size.
No, I'm saying if he played 15 games and he averaged 17 and a half touches a game, you might rank him as the overall RB1. Like literally because of his upside there.
I mean, I don't think that's debatable. My only question is, what are the chances that he actually gets that kind of workload? Because I think based on this situation, it is quite low, Marcus. He had just 5 games as a rookie with 10 or more touches.
Yeah, but in those games,
rush attempts. He had just 2 games with more than 15 rush attempts. Like I think you're going to have to rely very much on receiving work, which, again, he was productive as a receiver. As a rookie, had 197 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. I'm not denying that the ceiling is very, very high, but we saw that floor is very, very volatile. And if I'm drafting a top 10 running back, I need a little bit more safety than I think Achane's going to provide. It feels very rich to me. And, I do think you look at the situation, obviously, you have Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert. Both of them are under contract here through the 2024 season. I don't know that with their current depth situation, they have really much incentive to cut him or either of them. But they can save a little bit of money, a little bit more releasing Jeff Wilson than Raheem Mostert. But I just don't see that the Dolphins can proceed with the very short history that we've seen and just put all their eggs in the Achane basket.
This is why I'm buying. There was 5 games this year, Kate, where he had 10 or more carries. Here are the rushing numbers in those 5 games. 18 for 203 and 2 touchdowns, 11 for 151 and a touchdown, 17 for 73 and 2 touchdowns, 14 for 107, and then 10 for 56 and a touchdown. Like basically whenever he gets double-digit carries, you're getting like the RB1 type of production. And we saw a willingness to throw him the ball, especially later in the season. There's just not very many running backs outside of the top 5 that have his kind of upside. And my goal is to win Dynasty leagues. And I want the guys that are going to help me win. And I think Achane is one of them. Like if he hits his ceiling or if he hits 85% of his ceiling, I'm probably going to go pretty far in my fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, but he's also probably not going to show up in plenty of games that are going to absolutely kill you. I mean, if you had him toward the end of the season, Marcus, if you were relying on him for fantasy football playoffs, you didn't get much. And I think part of that was due to health. I don't know that he was fully healthy after returning from injury. He had obviously like the most efficient start to the season that you could have ever imagined. In the second half of the season, 5.6 yards per attempt, which is still excellent. But it's still not the ceiling that you saw in the first half. And I do think that, again, part of that was related to health. But I just have this nagging suspicion that health might be more of a long-term concern for him, especially considering the biggest question mark for him was size. And he, all of the issues with Achane played into that this year. I don't think he's ever going to be a running back that this team can give 20 touches in week in and week out.
Just will say week 17 fantasy football championships, 137 yards and a touchdown against the Baltimore Ravens on a bad foot. So still productive, even when he's banged up. All right, let's talk about one of the biggest dynasty losers from this team. There wasn't many because this offense was so good all season long, but there was a clear one. We will get to him next. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wondered what adventure could be right around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level. The Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right in to the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen informant system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. They also have an incredible lineup of 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. They have the Nissan Armada, which I really love. Take your Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada to go on your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Okay, let's talk about Jaylen Waddle, who a lot of people had as a top 6 dynasty receiver at this time last year. Now his ADP has fallen down to wide receiver 12. Why is he the biggest dynasty loser for you?
I gotta say, it's just kind of a lack of upside that we saw from Jaylen Waddle here this season. And that's not to say he didn't have a really solid year. I mean, he averaged 2.63 yards per route run. That was tied for 6th in the NFL. You look at, his PFF receiving grade, ranked 5th in overall PFF receiving grade, averaged 14 yards per reception. Like, he had a pretty solid season when you're looking at his statistical efficiency, yards after the catch. Like, he boasted all of that. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. But I think with a lot of the receiving weapons, or maybe I guess I'm just kind of talking about Tua here, but
Yeah.
we'll get to him in a minute. That success on the field didn't translate to fantasy production as often as you would like for a top end dynasty asset that before the season, he was being drafted in a lot of leagues towards the end of the first round, early second round in dynasty startups.
Yeah, I know. Even when he was healthy, he wasn't a huge difference maker. Now, he was productive. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like he was unplayable, but he wasn't a game changer. And there were too many games where he left with an injury. And frankly, like, that's my concern now is I don't want to say he's injury prone, but he is one of these receivers where if he's nicked up at all, it just greatly diminishes his impact on the field. Now, maybe things will change when Tyreek Hill moves on or whatever, but it's not happening this year. It's probably not happening next year either. So we're going to be at like age 27, age 28, Jaylen Waddle before he ever gets the chance to be like the number one receiver in the offense, if that ever happens.
If that ever happens. Now, I mean, he is in kind of a key season coming up. So I'm going to assume that this team is going to pick up his
Oh,
5th
yeah.
year option. And I mean, he is going to kind of play for his future with the Miami Dolphins. We've already seen Tyreek Hill put kind of a timestamp. He said he's playing out his contract and then he's done. So
We'll see.
we'll see. We'll see. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, Tyreek Hill, he's made a ton of money. If he's not prioritizing playing football at that point, I think that's perfectly fine. But the Dolphins, I think they're going to have to take a serious look at Jaylen Waddle and whether or not he's capable of being that true wide receiver 1. Now, finishes a wide receiver 34 this year, ranked, 23rd in fantasy points per game. Again, not terrible production, just not offering the kind of upside that you expected for this caliber of prospect. The good thing is that you look at the Miami Dolphins offense, obviously Tyreek Hill is going to be this team's wide receiver 1, but because of the efficiency that this offense produces, I think also in big part to the successes they found in the run, it doesn't take Jaylen Waddle as many of those targets
Nope.
as maybe it did in his rookie season to produce. I just don't know.
Here's the thing that comes down for me for Waddle. He had a 1,300-yard season last year, played all 17 games. He only missed 3 games this year, which is not a huge deal, and it was another 1,000-yard season. So that's 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons to kick off his career. Absolutely phenomenal. But it gets into this Chris Olave conversation that we had with Matt Williamson last week, where the raw counting numbers are really good at the end of the season. But when it comes to like fantasy points that actually help you per game, it's kind of underwhelming. And if you're having to pay top 10 and in Jaylen Waddle's case, top 12 prices, I just think there's other receivers out there that are going to be more consistent to get you 17 to 18 points a game than Jaylen Waddle. And maybe things will change. Maybe we'll see his role in the offense change a little bit. But I think right now with Tyreek Hill, his ceiling is a little capped.
Yeah, I mean, what's fascinating is even in a very efficient season for this Miami Dolphins pass tag, I mean, Tua led the league in passing yards for the regular season, and we only saw Jaylen Waddle finish as a wide receiver 1 twice this season.
And that's right. He's a very good player that just doesn't give you that week winning upside.
Yeah, and you also mentioned the health portion. There were a lot of games that we saw Jaylen Waddle come on and off the field. That's obviously going to play a part of that. Availability is huge, but he kept getting nicked up throughout the year, even if it didn't affect his availability in the following game, or if he came back in, there were snaps missed due to some of these kind of various injuries that definitely affected his upside. And I do think that you're probably drafting Jaylen Waddle for his upside at that current cost and not necessarily a product of what he's actually produced in terms of fantasy production.
And I would move him down a lot. I think wide receiver 12 is right about where he should be drafted. But you just got to remember, this was somebody who was being drafted as a top 6, top 7 Dynasty receiver at this time last year. And while that's only like a 5-spot difference, the further up you get in the Dynasty rankings, the more significant that drop is. So going from wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 12 is a pretty big drop. He's one of the only players in this offense that I feel a little bit worse about a year later. Okay, one of the players that I certainly don't feel worse about, and maybe you disagree, is Tua. I'm kind of all in on Tua this offseason. I am buying him. I will explain why next. This episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And for now, some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. On Friday's show, we're going to get you ready for the Super Bowl. We're going to talk a little bit about who we expect to win that game, some Dynasty players to keep an eye on. We'll update you on all of the Dynasty values of all the most significant players, so make sure you tune in for that. But Kate, before we go, I just want to talk about Tua really quickly because he is somebody that I'm buying this offseason. He's down to QB 13 in Dynasty leagues. I think that's a steal. You're talking about somebody who had over 4,600 passing yards this year. The touchdowns were a little low. He had 29, but you got to remember Raheem Mostert had like 21 touchdowns this season, stole a bunch of them at the goal line. Our biggest concern from Tua this offseason was injuries and whether or not he was just going to make it through the season. Played all 17 games. I just feel so much better about Tua now than I did 12 months ago. Hope you're on mute.
I think that's fair. I like from a statistical standpoint, really hard to argue with what we've seen from Tua this year. I mean, ranked top 5 in passing yards, passing touchdowns. passer rating, yards per attempt. Like, he had the most efficient season that you possibly could have imagined, Marcus. Here's my gripe. It did not translate to fantasy production in the way that it should have. So if this is the kind of ceiling that we see for Tua when he is at his absolute best and leading the NFL in passing yards, and he still finishes as QB9 on the year, like, I'm not saying QB9's a terrible, terrible finish, but he had 3 top 5 finishes in the first 6 weeks of the year. From week 7 on, we saw a huge dip in that production. Finish as QB 16 or lower in 6 of 11 games, week 7 onward. He hurt you more than he helped you in those instances. And I think a lot of this happened from, developing their identity in the run game. They ranked bottom 10 in pass play percentage this year. So again, you're relying so much on that efficiency. I don't know if there's going to be enough passing volume, even despite this efficiency, that if he loses that efficiency, Marcus, which I don't necessarily know that he is, I think it's a great system. I just don't know that the ceiling is high enough for fantasy and the floor is low enough for fantasy that I'm really looking to invest. I think this could be an opportunity to sell high on Tua personally.
Between Raheem Mostert and De'Von Achane, they had 26 rushing touchdowns this year. That's just not sustainable. Like, I think there's a good chance that we see Tua, if he plays 16, 17 games next year, we'll see that touchdown production go up to 35, 36. And if that's the case, you're talking about a top 8 fantasy quarterback right away. We need to mention the offensive line injuries for Miami this year were out of control. Like, Teron Armstead missed more than half the season. They lost Connor Williams, their center, their right guard. Robert Hunt missed a big chunk of the season. Lester Cotton was somebody that they picked up before the year started. Like, they just had the worst luck when it came to offensive line injuries, and he was still able to be productive. And then on top of that, one of the reasons why I feel so good about Tua is one of the things that we know about concussions is, like, the further that you're removed from your concussions, the less of a concern it is. And now that Tua is at least 16, 17 months removed from his last concussion, I just feel a little bit better that he's not going to be as susceptible to them moving forward. He's being drafted outside the top 12 quarterbacks, and I think that's wrong. That's all.
I think, Marcus, again, I think that's totally fine. But when you have, you're one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the league and you still finish as the overall QB9 with the number of injuries that we saw at the quarterback position, I'm just questioning this upside here, because if he loses any bit of that efficiency, it's not like we have, a rushing floor that we can rely on with Tua. He had 17 total scrambles on the season that ranked 25th among running backs. He only had 19 designed rush attempts, and he wasn't even efficient with them. He averaged 2.6 yards per carry.
He's not a runner.
He's not a runner. So you don't have that element of the game to kind of boost the floor if he's not going to have a big day as a passer. And I do worry, just again, with the way that this season played out, we think of the Dolphins as a passing team because they are so efficient in the passing game. But I think what we saw this year is that they actually want to run the ball. And I have a hard time investing in Tua just because I don't know that the ceiling is worth the low floor at this point.
I want to invest in this offense just because Mike McDaniel has proven that they can
points will be scored.
Points will be scored. To me, it's no really different than the Joe Burrow conversation that we had a few weeks ago. Like, this is a much better offense than what Cincinnati's ever been. Joe Burrow doesn't run. Tua doesn't run. I actually trust Miami that they're going to throw the ball more and be more efficient and probably just have more raw numbers. I'm not saying that I would take Tua over Burrow, but I think both guys share similar concerns. One is being drafted as QB6. The other one is being drafted at QB13. And Kate, one has actually been far healthier in his career, and that's Tua. Now, I understand Tua's injuries are more concerning when it comes to, like, him staying in the league, but you can't ignore Joe Burrow's injury history or his injury pattern either. So give me Tua, QB13, buying him all day long. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Bonjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We will see you right back here tomorrow.